Hello, Tungsten Miner here. Last time I left off talking about the smeltery after having covered a lot of the Tinker's Construct basics in the video before, and this time I'm going to carry on with, well, everything else. Okay, ore bushes. What we have here is a creeper bush, and if I right-click this guy, it's going to give me some essence berries. And let me change my game mode to survival. And as I eat the berries just by right-clicking, I gain experience. So this is an experience bush. And if you manage to collect a bunch of these things, then you can get yourself a whole lot of experience really, really quickly. So if you do a lot of enchanting, these are fantastic things to have around. Now, the one bush is going to stay one bush. So for every one block you find out in the world, and you'll very often find these deep in caves, you get one of these bushes. They can be planted one on top of the other once they're fully mature. So you can make a pretty tall hedge of these bushes. And the same is true of all the different kinds of bushes. Actually, no, that's not true. It's only true of these bushes. You have to be a little creative with the other ones. Down here, I have a little cave. So I'm going to hit myself with a night vision potion so that we can kind of see what's going on down here. Probably wise to put myself back in creative here. Here we have some ore berry bushes. So like the bush above, if I right click, I'm going to harvest the berries off of these different bushes, and they will grow back eventually, and sometimes very rapidly. And these are all the different kinds. So aluminum, gold, iron, copper, and tin. And each berry is the equivalent of 1 nugget's worth of metal. So you can take these berries and drop them into your smelter and then get back 1 nugget at a time. And you can actually put a nugget on the casting table and get a cast of a nugget. So you literally can get them back 1 nugget at a time. But of course, it's a little bit easier if you collect enough berries to get back at least an ingot or maybe a whole block's worth before you go to the trouble of tossing them in the smeltery and melting them down. But the important thing is they grow back. So if you find these bushes, you have now got yourself a growing source of metal, which means metal is now a renewable resource. And if you're clever with other mods, you can harvest these things and have an infinite supply of metal. It's one of the reasons that I actually frequently turn them off in the mod packs I put together. There's a config setting so that you can make these things not appear. Because if you're clever, they can be a little overpowered, but they are hard to come by. So it's not completely crazy. Okay, so heading back upstairs here, that is ore berry bushes and essence berry bushes. Moving on, let's talk about all of the different kinds of things that you can get. All the different tools. So I've gone ahead and given myself one of all of the different tools you can make with the beginner's tool station, that wooden table that we looked at in the very first beginning. To start off with, let's talk about the pickaxe. There it is. Okay. Cool thing about pickaxe, they work basically like you'd expect them to. That's a lot more impressive when you're not in creative mode. Let's see here. Game mode, survival. Plop block down. There we go. So works more or less like a pickaxe, kind of what you'd expect. The one nifty thing about almost all of these Tinker's Construct tools is that if you right-click with the tool and you've got some block that you normally could place by right-clicking next to it, you can just place those items directly in the world with that tool. So you can see I'm placing down these torches by right-clicking, having selected my iron pickaxe, rather than having selected the torches themselves. So obviously, this is super, super handy when you're dealing with placing torches in a mine, for example. But it can also be handy if you're doing something with lava, say, and or you're digging close to lava, and you can keep, say, these stone blocks next to your tool and automatically fill in any gap in the lava as it comes at you. Next up, the shovel. Shovel works like regular shovel does. It also does the right-click trick. Next up is the mattock. The mattock works basically like a hoe, except it also works like a shovel. So anything that a shovel normally would be used to go after it works with, and anything that a hoe would normally use to do, it works with. The nice thing is, if you have AgriCraft installed, as I do, you can also use it to right-click a second, first time to till, second time to dig a trench, so that you get your water beds for AgriCraft purposes in one tool. Next up, we have a couple of ranged weapons. First, you have just a regular short bow, which works more or less like any Minecraft bow. You hold down the right mouse button, take aim, let go, and shoot at your target. The nice thing is that you can collect those arrows again, and you can see, here's my iron-tipped arrows, and I can use them as a weapon. It's like a very weak sword, basically, or I can use them here. The really, really cool thing about Tinker's Construct arrows is that you can put moss on them. And moss, as we know, recharges damage. Well, the amount of arrows you have remaining is considered a kind of damage, which means if you put moss on your arrows, they will automatically regenerate. And so you basically have infinite arrows. The shuriken are from a Japanese samurai time period, but they're a fairly weak but very, very fast to fire weapon, and also something that you can pick back up again. Pretty much all of the Tinker's Construct missile weapons are things that you can just go walk over and grab again. Many of them have a small percentage chance of breaking when they hit something, and that varies based upon the kind of material. Throwing knife, you can stab people with it, as you might expect, but you can also hold back by right-clicking, take aim, and fire. So it works kind of like a bow, but as you can see, the draw speed is a bit faster, and it's a lot better to use as a weapon than a bow is on its own. Next up, we have a dagger. So the dagger, it's a stabbing weapon and a throwing weapon, but you only get one of them. There isn't like a stack of them, and as you can see, they're quite a lot harder to aim. Looks like I missed with something else, whatever that was. Yeah, so it's a little bit dubious as a weapon. I mean, even point blank, it went right over his head. So I generally don't bother about making daggers personally. Okay, next up, let's see, different kinds of weapons. So your battle sign does a minimal amount of damage, and other than that, it if you hold shift and right click, you can plant it like a sign, and it works exactly like you'd expect it to work. And you can pick it back up again the way you can. So you can basically make signs out of whatever materials are available. The broadsword is exactly equivalent to a Minecraft sword. There's nothing at all different about it. The cutlass is basically the same as a Minecraft sword. I've yet to figure out what's actually different about it. You can block, you can strike, kind of all the same stuff. The hatchet is just like the axe. It works basically the same way. The longsword's kind of cool because if you hold down right click, like you're charging up a bow, when you let go, your character does this big leap forward. So you can walk around like this and say you're trying to sneak up on a skeleton. Boom. Very handy if you need to get to something quickly. The rapier is basically the opposite. If you right click, you jump backwards. Now there's no charge time, you jump back immediately. So it's actually really good if you're trying to get out of a nasty situation, say with a creeper. But it's a weaker weapon. It doesn't do nearly as much damage as the longsword, or even the regular broadsword. Let's see, that I think covers everything except the frying pan. Frying pan is a relatively weak weapon, but it has a special characteristic. So here I've got myself some pork chops. If I shift and right click, it plants that frying pan down in the world. If I right click on that, I can now take some coal. I'll give myself some coal here. Let's switch back to game mode, creative, and I want some coal. And now it works just like a furnace, for food only. But it'll go ahead and fry up that bacon for me. So you can take down your quarry and cook it up, all in one convenient tool. Okay, next talking about the hatchet. It's basically what you think it is. Just a replacement for the axe. Doesn't do anything different or special. Okay, next up is the chisel. This is a little device you make so that when you right-click a block, it's going to walk through the couple of different patterns that it knows how to produce. Now, you may be familiar with the Chisel mod, which adds a similar kind of functionality, but this is a little bit more basic. You can only do it on blocks that are set up for it. So as you can see, I can go through sandstone, I can go through regular stone, but not end stone. And there's not as many patterns, and it's generally pretty handy if you're not going to have Chisel installed, but by itself, if you've already got the Chisel mod installed, that's going to have way more options and things that you can do with it. So this is another one of those tools which I generally don't bother about making for myself. That's it for the little tools. Now, let's talk about this tool forge. The way this thing works, creative, tool forge. First of all, talk about making one of these things. The recipe is to take 4 blocks of metal, and it can be any kind of metal. It doesn't have to be iron. So if iron happens to be what you have a lot of, then great. If you have a lot of something else, go ahead and use that too. Plus some seared bricks, plus your tool station. That will upgrade you to a tool forge. Now the difference is that you've got a lot more choices of what you can make with a tool forge. If you remember, the tool station had, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of this many. Among them, some of the really most significantly useful tools that this mod has to offer: the hammer, the lumberjack axe, and the excavator. So let's talk about each of these in turn. I have got myself a bunch of exactly those tools. So if we start off by looking at the crossbow. The crossbow is similar to a bow in that you need projectiles and you fire them, you can shoot at a distance and so on and so forth. But when I right-click the crossbow, it's slowly going to load itself until it locks into place. Now I can take it out of my inventory. I can throw it on the ground. I can pick it up again and find that it's still cocked and ready to go. So I fire now by just right-clicking and boom, it's fired. Now it's slowly going to crank itself back up again, but it will fire extremely rapidly once it's ready. So it's a great weapon to have when you're not really sure about how safe an area you're going into. It also has the ability to be really powerful. Crossbows are a little bit complicated in that the bow, let's go back over here and take a look here. Crossbows. The bow portion needs to be stretchy and bendy, so certain kinds of materials work best for that, like slime. The stock needs to be stiff and rigid and very durable, so metal pieces tend to work better for this. The string has to be something you can make bowstring out of, which is really just string, so you don't really have a choice here. And then the cross piece is the free piece. So you can add more strength by putting in some obsidian. You could add some more sharpness by adding in some cactus. You can add in another writable slot by using paper. Whatever it is that you want to do. But the combination of these things affect the various characteristics. So the draw speed is largely controlled by the bow. The durability is largely controlled by the stock. And there's charts and tables and things you can find online that will give you kind of a breakdown of how much which piece affects which of these things. So I encourage you to go look those up. And I'll see if I can toss a link in the notes for the video. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is this javelin. The javelin works pretty effectively as just a stabbing weapon in the hand, right? Not quite as good as a sword, but pretty darn close. But when you throw it, it gets really powerful. So like a bow, it has a wind-up time, but if you just right-click, it throws it very gently. If you wind up more, it throws it with a good deal more force. So the longer you hold off, the better you're going to be. Normally, you can also collect these things. I'm in creative mode at the moment, so I'm not losing inventory. But you can definitely pick these things up again if you've lost the inventory. It also is kind of interesting in that they'll stick up in the ground if you throw them at a high angle. So they can be quite easy to spot if you have tossed them that way. Next up is the cleaver. The cleaver really honestly is just a big sword. That's all it does. They start off with 11 attack damage, which is nearly double that of any other sword. And if you play your cards right and use powerful materials, add lots of quartz, these things can one-hit kill pretty much anything except an Enderman. This almost always winds up being my final weapon. The one problem is that they give you mining fatigue. Now, it's a 0 duration, so it only lasts while you're holding the weapon. But that does mean, as you can see, you can't swing particularly fast. This is me clicking as fast as I ever can. And you just can't swing all that fast. So you have to time your shots pretty well. If you're used to using later versions of Minecraft, I think 9 and above, you're already used to this. This is already a game mechanic. But if you've been using earlier versions of Minecraft, then this is something you'll have to get used to. Next up is this lumber axe. This thing is tremendous. So I have set myself up with a super tall jungle tree. Let me get back into survival here. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to chop 1 block at the bottom of this tree. That's it. 1 block, whole tree. It will chop down pretty much every block of any kind of tree you happen to have all in one go, no matter how big that tree is. There are, in fact, limits, right? So if you're using something like Mistcraft or RF tools to make a dimension, and you have the entire world made out of tree blocks, then yes, it will have a range and only be able to get so many of them. But it can get quite a lot. One of the funny things that happens, though, is if you have one that's close on durability, and it uses up the durability in the course of chopping down the tree, it'll leave the tree half not chopped down, right? Every durability point used is used in the process of chopping the tree down. So it's possible to wind up with half a tree and no way to reach the top half without, tower jumping your way to the top there. Okay, next up is the scythe. This, when right-clicked against some kind of grass, or left-clicked rather, will chop down a 3x3 area of whatever that grassy material is. So flowers or tall grass or whatever you happen to have around. Very, very nice way of clearing a broad space very rapidly. For example, if you're setting up a farm or clearing space for a house or whatever. Finally, that leaves our battle axe. So the battle axe is mostly a combat weapon. It has a really good knockback, so it'll toss creatures back from you quite a ways. But it also has the ability to knock down up to a 9-meter tall chunk of blocks. I think they have to be trees, so I think there has to be leaves at the top there. That's why it's not working as well in this case. But you can use it for chopping wood. It's just not really what it's aimed at. Very, very good, though, for dealing with creepers and zombies and other creatures that you want to get rid of quickly and not have them get too close to you. Really, really awful for dealing with skeletons, of course, because now you've given them another chance to shoot at you before you can reach them. Okay, next up, I want to talk about the Traveler's Gear. This is a pretty cool set of armor that is added by Tinker's Construct that works very much along the same lines as all the Tinker's tools. in that once you've built the base item, you can further extend it by adding on different materials to make the armor even better. So the basic recipe for these guys is usually pretty simple. Leather, glass, gold for the goggles, leather, aluminum, and wool of any kind for the armor, and leather, string, and aluminum for the boots. The one thing that's a little bit tricky is the wings. You need to make yourself some bronze, so using your smelter, get some gold, and an ender pearl, which of course early on in the game is pretty hard to come by. So these may not be something you manage to make for yourself for a little while. But once you've got them, you can extend them. So as an example, let me take off my traveler's goggles here and drop them in the center here. I'm going to take a potion of night vision, the weaker version, golden carrot, and flint and steel, and that's going to give me my traveler's goggles with some extra abilities, night vision and -1 of its modifiers because I've used it already. So now if I stick these back on my face here, I can say change the time to midnight, time set midnight. Now it's pitch black all around, but if I press my hotkey, I can turn on the night vision in my goggles, and you can see this is going to be basically permanent because it's going to renew itself automatically, and it works exactly like the night vision potion, giving you the night vision effect. Time set to noon, and turn off the night vision. I can also take, for example, my wings and add them to make them have feather fall. And now I've got high jump and feather fall on my wings. So for example, I can jump up 2 meters, and you can see that I fall down a little bit more slowly. Game mode creative, so I'll fly up really high, and then slowly fall back to earth. Okay, so there's a couple of other items that you can make that, strictly speaking, are not part of your armor, but are actually really, really useful. So go back to game mode survival, and my inventory now has this extra slot for armor. And I can take my knapsack, toss it in the knapsack slot, my belt, drop it in the belt slot, and take my gloves, drop it in the glove slot. And now I've got these extra capabilities. The glove, first of all, really doesn't do much for you unless you add improvements to it. And the thing that you generally want to add is redstone. So these traveler's gloves, you can drop them on a tool forge or any other station, add whatever stuff you want, just like any other tool, and that's going to be automatically applied to whatever tool you happen to be holding. I'm pretty sure only redstone works, so pile on your redstone to your gloves and not your tools, and that way, no matter what tool you've got in your hand, it's still going to have the benefit of all that redstone. The next thing is this knapsack, and you can see now that I've put it on, I have a knapsack tab, which gives me basically just a whole nother inventory. One thing to note though is that all knapsacks have their inventory shared. It's kind of like an ender pouch. So if you happen to be traveling along and you destroy your knapsack, you can make yourself another one and get those materials back again. So it's a great place to stash those diamonds or gold or whatever you found as you're adventuring that you really, really want to hang on to, because you can always make yourself another one if it gets lost. And then finally, the belt actually requires me to have some things in my inventory. So let me grab like a couple of different swords here, maybe. Sword pieces. So when I press my B key, I'm going to switch my belt. So my hotbar now has got a completely different set of stuff in it. So for example, I can give myself some things here, and then switch back to my other set of things and back to this one. So the way that I like to use this is my primary has my sword, my pickaxe, the basic survival tools that I always want to be available all the time. And then when I switch, I'm going to have those tools that I don't use very often. So my lumberjack axe, my hammer, my excavator, maybe my some food, a bed or a sleeping bag, all those sorts of things you only need once in a while. And then here's the stuff that I'm using all the time. And this gives you a great way to easily switch back and forth between those two different sets of things. Let me get rid of some of that. Okay, moving on. The next thing to talk about are slime and slime channels. So these kind of funky looking things, you can see they've got a directionality to them. So when you place them down, you have to be facing in the direction you want them to go towards. And they work a lot like moving water. So if I take the dirt out of the chest here and just drop them one by one into the slime channel, you can see that item is slowly moving away from me, just like it would if I dropped it into water. And one by one, the dirt's going to make its way through the slime channel, drop down into the hopper, and wind up over here. This is especially handy if you're trying to have some kind of system for gathering, say, crops that are dropped, or mob drops that come around, or whatever you'd normally try to do with, say, conveyor belts in one mod, or just running water in vanilla. They don't have as much of a drain on the CPU as a lot of other ways of doing things. Apart from the animated texture, they're really quite simple. So if you're on a server and you've got a lot of other people, you can keep the CPU usage down and still manage to collect a bunch of stuff this way. Next up are these bounce pads. So bounce pads are made in the same way that slime channels are. Let's take a look at that. Slime channel, there we go. And the recipe for this guy is any kind of slime balls with a little bit of redstone gets you a slime channel. Or you can take a congealed block of slime, which really is just 4 of that color slime balls, so it's really the same recipe. And then you can use these things to make bounce pads by adding 1 extra piece of slime to make the bounce pad on top. And the way these things work is anytime you touch them, you get bounced up and a little bit in the direction of the blue dot. So when you put them down, you can orient that blue dot facing in one direction or another, including towards the corners of the block. But if I have a running start, it's going to bounce me way forward, and when you land on the next one, you get an additional bounce. The timing is a little tricky, and it's thrown off by having feather fall. So I went and figured out exactly the position for these before. There we go. So you can see, even with just 2 of them, I've managed to very rapidly traverse a long stretch of terrain. So these things are very, very handy if you want to make some kind of transport system or roadway or whatever that has bounce pads as part of a way to propel you faster and faster as you go along. You can also put them at the end of these slime channels, and whatever item comes along will run into the bounce pad, and the item will get bounced far, far along. So you could potentially set up a system of these things for moving items a long ways, in addition to yourself. Next up, we have the drying rack. The drying rack allows you to take various items and convert them into a dried up form. So this started out as zombie flesh and is now, if I right click on there, zombie jerky, which is a decently nutritious, not super nutritious food item. But hey, we all wind up with a lot of extra zombie flesh eventually, and that's one way to turn it to some good account. A gelatinous slime drop, also another decently good food source. That one's from blue slime. This one eventually will turn into a green slime drop. And here are a couple of the extras. You can also throw pretty much any kind of meat on a drying rack and it will be converted. And I think there are a few other things that aren't coming to mind. So yeah, experiment and see what you can put on there. NEI has the drying rack as one of its tools that you can process things with. Next up is the igniter. It pretty much does what you expect it to. You can face this thing in different directions and it will ignite on whatever the redstone cap surface is facing towards. The recipe, oops, there we go, is pretty straightforward. Just some bronze, aluminum, brass, a netherrack large plate, flint and steel, and redstone, all of which are pretty cheap, easy to make. Next up is the drawbridge. This is one of my top favorite things to come out of this mod. I should mention, starting with this guy, the rest of this stuff is in an extension mod called Tinkers Mechworks. It's almost always downloadable from the same places that you're going to find Tinkers Construct, and I highly recommend you get both when you get it. Okay, so back to the drawbridge. I threw my switch, and block by block, it built this drawbridge across to that other side. And I'm basically just giving it a redstone signal to activate. The drawbridge itself is actually this block here. This isn't really stone bricks. It's a drawbridge that's disguised as stone bricks. So if I take out the camouflage block from this left-hand slot, you can see what this block actually looks like in the world. But you can camouflage it as any block you want just by dropping a copy of that block in there. And so now it looks just like the rest of my cobblestone, or my stone brick staircase here. The block that you use for making the bridge out of is just put in this right-hand slot and off it goes. So if I want to withdraw the bridge, I remove the redstone signal, bridge comes back again. These are used if you have a block which has different facings to determine which direction it's facing when you do it. Mostly I don't bother about that, so I leave it in the center. But if you're using, I don't know, staircases or slabs or something like that, you'll want to experiment with these different arrows to get the orientation for that block that you want. Next is the advanced drawbridge. And this one has the same camouflage, but instead of having just one slot, it has a whole lot of slots for inventory. And what it will do is when it's making the bridge, the very first block it puts out will be this one, and then this one, and this one, this one, and so on, all the way down until it gets to here. So it can't make quite as long of a bridge because it's only got so many slots here, but you can make it with a variety of blocks to have a different appearance midway through. And then finally, there's an extended drawbridge, which works exactly like the drawbridge, except it can go a lot further. I have 64 blocks in here, but I think this only extends to 16. And if you wanted to use all 64 blocks, you'd need the extended drawbridge instead. And that's it. That's Tinker's Construct. Like I said, a very large mod, fairly complicated, but there's a number of things you get out of this that make it so essential that I add it to every single mod pack. First and foremost is the modular tool system. No more rebuilding the tools over and over again as they wear out and disappear on you. You can just keep improving them a little bit at a time with just a little extra material. Second is the ability to add moss to things and give them the ability to recharge their durability so that you don't have to add more material to them. They can just get better and better and better over time and keep recovering their durability. Next is the smeltery. That thing is just so essential. It's the easiest way to get ore doubling early on in the game. And it's certainly the easiest way to get different smelted alloys early in the game. There are a couple of other mods that allow you to do this, thermal expansion in particular, but none of them are nearly so kind of easy to get going and set up as this guy. Really, you need sand, clay, and gravel to make this thing, and that's it. You're good to go. A little bit of glass and some lava for fuel. So really the way to go early on in order to get some really powerful stuff. The bushes are nice, a little overpowered in my opinion, so I tend not to use them, but a lot of people like them. The Matic, very, very handy combination tool, and has the same kind of rechargeable ability or durability. And then finally, these guys, the lumber axe, the hammer, and the excavator. Three tools I don't know what I would do without. They're just so valuable. Especially if, like me, you like building really large structures and you need to clear a lot of ground in order for that to work. So just a tremendous amount of really, really great stuff in Tinker's Construct. I hope you liked the video. Hit the like button if you did. If you want to know when the next video is coming out, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you later.